Okay, hey everybody, this is Harvey Sluggo, Sonny Wasserman back for the 197th, is that right? 197th Green Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition Zoom call in the so-called morning after. That's Mourning. We are starting off with, let's see, we got 23 people, and we're going to go for an hour today on a to wrap up what we know about the election. We will meet again on Monday for the 2-hour session, but this was initially scheduled to see if there are any things we needed to do in the wake of an expected fight, but here we are. So everybody is soaking in and trying to make sense of what happened in the election, and it's going to be an interesting discussion, which we must start, of course, with poetry. We have to start with poetry, and we have our wonderful poet laureate, MIMI GERMAN, with us. MIMI, you want to jump in and give us some verse before we go to Andrea Miller and take a deep dive into the mechanics of this election?
I would love to. Thank you all for being here today. I'm really happy to be here today. So I hadn't written anything in a couple weeks, which was a bummer. I wanted to, and then Tuesday happened. So this poem was written Wednesday morning. What was that? Yesterday? Yesterday morning.
Yeah.
It's called Democracy Hangs. The weight of democracy hangs heavy like new mountain snow on the bough. Hear the cries of the coyote, alone, it howls deep in night's canyon. Ravens pin their dark wings to the horizon, the fawn of dawn, forever lost in the stormy sea of yesterday. And the night of the election, I had this poem in my head. So this is the second of the three. It's called When Democracy Died. This was parts of this were a literal dream that I had that night in moments of sleeping. When democracy died, they came at night, guns pointed, carrying sacks of snakes, hissing in the dark winds. I rose from my bed, scared, terrified, walking into the dream. The snakes had slithered into my house from beneath the doors, from the opened windows, writhing as they do in the dream. I stood silent, wanting to scream, but afraid to move, unable to breathe as the snakes circled my feet, sniffing at my skin. And as their bodies recoiled, ready to strike, I woke inside the dream, aware that it was not a dream, but the rattle of a new reality, fully awakened in the nightmare of this present hour. The third poem I wrote this morning. The last leaves have fallen. November brings harsh winds, too cold for even roots to survive.
Wow.
Thanks.
Okay. Well, we got 42 people with us, and just to be a little upbeat, I last night watched the third part of a 3-part Netflix series called Comeback, about I watched it with my 2 grandsons, about how the Boston Red Sox in 2004 were down 3-0 in the ALCS, American League Championship Series, to the New York Yankees. And they faced, they were losing 4-3 in the 9th inning, which would have ended the series had they lost, and another year would be added to the 86-year curse of the Red Sox never winning the World Series since they traded or sold Babe Ruth. And in this real life documentary, Mariano Rivera, the greatest relief pitcher in the history of baseball, was on the mound. All he had to do was get the Red Sox out, and the Yankees would have won yet another series over the Red Sox, prolonging the 86-year curse. And what happened was Mariano Rivera walked a batter, which he never did. And the guy named Dave Roberts, who is the current, somebody's shaking their head, a fellow baseball fan, Chloe. Dave Roberts, who is the current manager of the LA Dodgers, was put in as a pinch runner. He was really fast. And he stole second base by literally a fraction of an inch. And he was on second, and they knocked him in against all odds and won the game in 12 innings, and then did something no team had ever done before or since, which is win a 7-game series after being down 3-0. No one ever did it before. No one ever done it since in Major League Baseball. The Red Sox went on to break the 86-year curse and win the World Series. I watched that with my grandsons. It was a peak experience, let me tell you, having been born in Boston. So I will share that with you. Mimi, thank you for those powerful poems. And we had,
Sonny,
yeah,
can I just share something that I spoke with you about this morning? Because it's
go ahead.
so I've been hearing this now for whatever it's been, 24 hours. So the what do we do next part? So, okay, we're all going to rally. We're going to do this thing. My question to everybody and my thought to everybody is we're responding to this as if we're going to have another opportunity in 4 years to vote. The whole premise of his winning is fascism. And that is what this country voted for. And I am stunned at how many people are still not taking this seriously. That like, oh, in 4 years, we'll just vote again. So I don't, if anyone can help me in the course of this whole chat for the next hour on how we're supposed to be moving forward when this is what he got elected to do, that would
Well,
be great.
that's what we're here for, Mimi. We got 50 folks with us. I'm glad you raised it. I, who wrote 2 major pieces on the internet comparing Trump to Hitler, which others, there was a poll, by the way, that said that there was a substantial number of people who supported him being Hitler. So we'll have to see. You raised the issue, and here we are. Andrea Miller, you started the morning upbeat or the afternoon, and you are always an upbeat person and very powerful at that. So, among other things, you said in the intro that we won in Alabama. So let's hear
Yes.
it.
All right. Well, we did have some wins. We had some major disappointments, but we had some wins in Alabama in the 2nd congressional district. We actually won that race. We won in Virginia. Virginia is now the only southern state that voted for Harris. We voted for our U.S. senator, and we are still 6 and 5 in the U.S. House. This gives me the ability to look at what we did in those 2 elections and go, why did those elections go differently than elections in some other states? And we get back to something I've been talking about for a very, very, very long time, and that is democracy centers. We have 6 democracy centers in Virginia that engage with voters year round, and they did turnout. Now, do we need to improve the turnout? Yes, we do. In Alabama, we have 3 democracy centers, and the democracy centers went and got all the other organizations of color and a few that weren't, and they coordinated and they worked together as one. They were working on that in Georgia, but coalitions began to fray a little bit. So we're going to get back to basics. And again, money came in late. So they just didn't have the democracy center infrastructure. We're going to build it. Now, a very interesting thing happened in North Carolina. And what I'm going to do is share my screen. We definitely saw that there was a lot of racism and sexism. This is looking at federal elections. This is from the North Carolina State Board of Elections. I want you to look at two numbers. Donald Trump, 2.8 million votes. Kamala, 2.6 million votes. All right, now I'm going to switch to the state elections. These are the statewide elections. Josh Stein, governor, 3 million votes. Lieutenant governor, 2.7 million votes. Attorney general, 2.8 million votes. Auditor, 2.7 million votes. So in North Carolina, voters were very sophisticated. They went down the ballot, but they did not vote at the top of the ballot. So a very, very interesting race. And yes, Mimi, I certainly see the threat, but whenever there is a threat, that's it also says people just lie down and let it happen. So there are many of us who are going to be super vigilant. Virginia has an election in 2025. We are already preparing for the Virginia statewide election. We've got governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, the entire Virginia State House, a third of our Senate, and Georgia has municipal elections. It takes time to take institutions apart. And this is also assuming that there is going to be no fight back. There will be fight back, and it will take them a moment. So we're going to have elections in Virginia in 2025. There will be a midterm election in 2026, and we will be voting in 2028. Thanks, guys.
Well, thank you. I noticed one of the down ballot races that you pointed out in North Carolina where white candidates won was a woman.
Yes.
So a white woman Democrat won a down ballot race in North Carolina?
Yes. Yes. A white woman candidate running for a state office got more votes than a black Democratic candidate running for governor. So racism, sexism were on full display in North Carolina. So
Well,
it
very
is interesting.
interesting. I
They're
mean,
more racist than sexist.
as a historian looking at an overview, the first question you would ask about this election is, was America ready to elect a woman of color? That would be the first obvious question. Forget about Donald Trump or Kamala Harris. Was this a demographic that the people of the United States were ready to accept? We've had two consecutive female candidates. Well, Hillary Clinton won by 3 million votes.
Yes, she won the popular vote. Harris did not win the popular vote. Another very interesting metric, the state of Florida had an abortion amendment on the ballot. The abortion amendment got 57% of the vote, not enough to pass, but still 57% of the vote is enough to win the election. Harris got nowhere near 57% of the vote in Florida. Missouri also passed an abortion ballot amendment. So people supported the notion of keeping abortion safe and legal, but they were not supporting the notion of electing a black woman to do it.
Well, it's interesting. The number 57, by the way, seems to be the standard number. We had 3 referenda or 4 in Ohio on abortion and on gerrymandering. And in every case, the winning margin was 57%. I don't know what it is about the number 57, but that seems to be extant. So, Mimi, the question that is posed here, and Sandy Bozenius and then MYLA and TATANKA, we'll get to all of you. We got 55 people, almost 57. Actually, we get 57, a fair number on this this call as well. And of course, it's I guess there's one for each variety of Heinz pickles. But nonetheless, you know, there is a consistency here, and the question is, will Trump have enough momentum? He's going to control the Senate and the Supreme Court. The House is still up for grabs to dismantle the institutions to sufficiently to prevent more elections from happening. And you know, we'll see. And of course, reading Bernie Sanders's critique of the election, you have to wonder if he had been the nominee in 2016.
Yep.
Exactly.
You know, we'd be in another world. And
Yes.
people yell and
Yes.
scream at the Democratic Party. The question is, how many of the people running the Democratic Party are actually Democrats, as opposed to agents of various nefarious
They're
satanic.
corporatists. They're corporatists.
Right. And there you go. So, okay. Sandy Bozenius, did you take your hand down? Did you want to?
No, I want to talk.
Okay, you went and put on a shawl, so you must be cold. Go ahead.
Okay. Let me turn off my phone. I had
And
here.
then Mimi, TATANKA, and Dorothy Reich. Glad to have you back with us, Dorothy. Go ahead.
Okay. I have a plan. I don't think we can wait until, like somebody said earlier, that if, there may not be another election, maybe in another year or 2 years, but not another presidential election. That scares the heck out of me. I see Trump getting in office. We are in Germany 1932. I don't see any way that that's not going to happen the way this project 2025. So I think we need to act. We need to act really quickly. Greg Palast, who everybody on this program, I believe, knows, has cited that 10 million voters were purged from the voter rolls in this election. Not to mention the intimidation. There were some, places blown up. I wonder if they're Republican or Democrat strongholds. So we really need to.
They were black precincts, and they weren't blown up. They were just bumps.
I shouldn't have used that term, but I know.
Yes.
To be honest, I haven't been able to look at the news that much, so I'm just hearing bits and parts. It's been really rough. But in Ohio, we had Harvey was talking about it. We had an amendment to end gerrymandering. I mean, literally a 25-year program, 3 different campaigns. It was so successful. And the last weeks of the campaign, the Republicans put out signs that said, vote no and end gerrymandering. It was a complete lie. And it helped. It won their case. So we have got to, I think, what I would like to do is get Greg Palast, go to Greg Palast and say, okay, how are you fighting this? Because I know he's fighting it. And how can we do it? We need, while we still have the courts, while we still have some of the courts, while we have the presidency, the Senate, I think we have really got to hit hard on this. I just don't see how we can let Trump back into office. Once that he's got the military, he's got the police, he's got the courts anyway. I mean, dissension is going to be completely outlawed as far as I see it. I hope someone else sees it differently. But, we know how this played out in Germany and in Italy. So it scares the heck out of me. So that's what I'm suggesting. And part of this plan is not just go to Greg Palast and say, how can we help you? But Mark Elias, because everybody's saying, oh, yeah, we're going to keep fighting. But when? After Trump's in office, how are we going to fight then? I mean, seriously, how's that going to go? He'll just send the police after anybody who fights him. And I'd also like to promote this idea of everybody contacting Jimmy Kimmel and what's the other guy? My good guy.
Colbert.
Colbert, thank you. And say, put him on your show. And I know I've been writing every group I can today, trying to spread this idea. I guess I haven't really thought about it outside my own head. So what do you guys think of that?
Well, let's keep going. Thank you, Sandy. You're in Columbus, Ohio, the belly of the beast. MYLA, and then TATANKA, and then Dorothy. MYLA?
Thanks. I have a question. I think that the results of this election can be explained by all of the shenanigans, dirty tricks, suppression, just so there, it can be explained, but I have been encountering since the results were announced, a lot of people online in various chat rooms and on YouTube, etc., who are not confident that the results actually reflect the actual votes that were cast. And so I guess what I'd like to know, I haven't really formed an opinion. Andrea, you were talking about how people voted in North Carolina, and the question that came to my mind is how confident are you in the machinery of the election that the votes that were tallied actually are an accurate representation of how people cast their votes.
I'm reasonably confident.
And so that extends to so I think there are two questions here. And one is, are we confident that across the country in all 50 states that the votes were tabulated accurately? Because a lot of people are saying they don't believe they were, and I don't know.
And I think that's why it's important that we do things to prove that it was real and take a high road. Okay. I'll let you know what we're doing. We're talking to two candidates who are involved in a congressional race. The difference is 0.59%. And we're approaching both candidates, asking them to file a records request, because if there's a recount, that means they're going to have to count 250 to 300,000 ballots. They're going to have to count 1 million ballots, maybe more. Okay. And so we want to bring him into a room in the morning. We want to go ahead and run Abe, break him into 515 precincts, separate all theirs out, make their own special sheets that they can add up on one sheet, all the votes they got, and the other by just looking at the Excel, and then break it down to precincts, and then say, hey, now let's go ahead and take a couple of precincts in your district, and let's go ahead and set up a formula. Let's do ballot image number one. One person reads the ballot, the other person follows the row, and you go down.
So John, you're gonna take a deep
result. What?
Okay, you're gonna take a deep dive into this one election. Is that a congressional election?
It's a congressional, and we haven't done it yet, but the word is we want to put it out everywhere, because the real thing is nobody should walk away from this election wondering if it was real or not. I'm afraid it was real. And I'm afraid
5 million votes is a pretty steep hill to climb in terms of rigging an election. But, listen, we'll find out more.
Listen, I know enough about these systems, okay, that if I was an insider and I knew that I had impunity, I could take the cast vote record. I could go ahead and run a macro inside of it, and I can say every 10 votes, I want you to switch from Harris to Trump or vice versa. Point I'm trying to say, we shouldn't have to worry about this.
Right, we shouldn't, and we would have to do it in quite a few states. Let's put
it this way: 95% of the country is digital now. They all produce cast vote records.
What percentage of the vote? What percentage of the vote nationwide was on paper? Does anybody know?
About 90. One way or the other, probably over 95%. But I'll tell you what's going on. But what?
Okay.
Got hand marked paper, and then you have a BMD, which is a ballot marking device that produces a paper.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So you have to kind of look at it differently. Yeah.
Let's come back to that in a couple minutes. Let some other folks speak, and then we'll come back to Dorothy, and then Jen Carius. Oh no, I'm sorry. TATANKA is next, and then Dorothy. Go ahead,
Andrea. So this is the same question that MYLA asked, but it's specifically on Georgia. You probably were too busy to watch, but as I was watching, when a big batch of votes came in, it was still undecided. And there was a Harris person there who had, was Spanish speaking. And then there was a Republican there. And the commentator, it was either CNN or MSNBC, said, now this is how it should be. You got a Democrat and you got a Republican, okay? All is well. It's all fair. But they said, okay, we got our batch, and now it goes into the board or the committee, whatever it is, right? And they validate. Now, the picture I had, now this is my mind going, okay? I'm not saying it's true, but the picture I had with Raffensperger not there and with a total MAGA group, they're on the phone with Trump and they're planning, when they're going to do Georgia, and they're taking care of the votes. Is there a recount similar to what John says that we can actually verify it in Georgia down to the, out to every precinct?
I have no idea. I'm only familiar with the election equipment and the actual counting procedures in Virginia. What I know is while a lot of Black voters showed up early, they did not continue at that pace on election day. It just kind of plummeted.
Well, and
Yeah.
then the question, of course, is, as Greg has posited, how many people were stripped from the voter rolls before the election? And
Right.
Greg is
That's
saying that Greg has a big number on that, but we shouldn't be talking about him with him not here.
That's another
Well,
issue. I'm
right.
just wondering if they're outrunning, like Trump outruns the law, if they're outrunning the process of verifying it. And, whether that, every place that has a simple MAGA group in Georgia and in other
And
states
there's a lot.
where they just shave off the votes and they add it up, and, and it all reminds me about Trump making the mistake of saying, don't bother to vote in this election. We got it. Remember? Way back
Yeah, right.
when.
Yeah.
You'll never
Yeah.
have to
And
vote
we were
again.
all,
You'll
I
never have to
think,
vote again. Right.
and we
right.
were distracted to thinking maybe they'll do the lack of certification. But if they simply scrubbed them clean in the MAGA only, here's the confirmation votes, it gets out, the nation's so in a hurry to find out who won.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It's possible.
Yeah.
Okay. Dorothy
Yeah.
Reik?
Yeah. So, Kamala didn't do well in blue states either. States that the Democrats control. This was a legitimate election. Instead of parading around with Liz Cheney, maybe she should have been parading around with Reverend Barber. At the convention, she wouldn't let Reverend Barber bring any poor people up because it would be depressing, I guess. She wouldn't let any Palestinians be up there. A lot of people, especially young people, just couldn't vote for someone who supports a genocide. The big winners in this in the Democratic Party were Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar. They each got 70% of the vote, more than 70%. We need to look, if we want to remain Democrats, we need to look at the policies. We need to do some deep soul searching and realize that Bernie is right. The reason that I think that they didn't want Bernie to be running is there's something called a capital strike. Workers can strike and bankers can strike also. So if you get them angry enough, they start withholding loans, they start withholding funding, and then the whole country collapses. So that's the threat that they hold over the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. Do as we say. This whole country is really controlled by billionaires. And until we can figure out how to strip them of their control, then I don't know, it may be too late. We're going to see this kind of thing going on. It's terrifying. But if you think that this just happened all of a sudden, you need to listen to David Sirota and listen to the Master Plan podcast, all 11 episodes of it. They've been planning this for many, many years, and they finally won. I don't see in Project 25 that they're going to cancel elections. I don't believe that's part of the grand plan. Trump may say that, but that's not what they're planning to do. I was just on a call. I'm home because of the wind, and the fires, so they shut my road. And I thought, I could get out, but I thought, well, it's a good excuse to take a couple of days off work. And I'm pretty stressed out over the election. But I got a phone call. So I've been involved with Public Citizen for so long, it came on my landline. And I think that they are going to be a really good resource. They're starting to get together to have some lawsuits right now. And I think that maybe we should try to get somebody from Public Citizen to come talk to us. I'm going to ask Alan to get someone from Public Citizen to get on the PDA call. But I think they're a really good resource. Mark Elias was a wonderful resource as an attorney, but turns out we didn't need him because we lost this thing fair and square.
Yes.
Kamala really was way behind. And another thing that occurs to me is that these referenda on abortion are wonderful for the women in these states because they can save themselves from, maybe dying in childbirth. But because these Republican women saw that they could vote for the referendum, then they didn't have to vote for Kamala. They just voted to make abortion legal in their state, and then they went on and voted for Trump. So, there's two sides to everything. But I don't know. So those are my thoughts today. I'm pretty depressed.
Well, keep with us. Keep with us. I want to welcome Wendy Hauk, a friend of mine from the Actors Gang. She's got a play
I have to say, first of all, I was very happy to see Andrea keep nodding her head. That means a lot to me, Andrea.
Andrea, a head nod from you is worth a speech from anybody else. And anyway, Wendy's got a play in LA over the weekend, Frankenstein's festival, right? And Wendy, it's great to have you with us. Dave Saltman's with us from New York, our great Middle East expert, and my buddy from University of Michigan. Jen Carius, what do you got? Jen, are you unmuted? Yes.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for
60 people
having.
with us.
Thank you for holding the meeting. It's a question. If people worked as voter protection, they might know this. I was in Pennsylvania doing that. Did anyone actually experience voters who were turned away or had to cast provisionals? How much did they see this at the polling place themselves? I saw it, and I saw a couple other confusing things happen, but it was about 3% of the vote count. And where I was, Harris lost by 3.5% and Casey lost by 2%. So that number of provisional ballots, meaning, they weren't counted in the calling of the race for Pennsylvania, of course. That's right around 3%. If you do that across the swing states, you change the outcome. So did anyone actually see that at their polling place? Because I'd like to get a little data. If folks do know folks, I'd be happy to collect some data on that.
Where were you, Jen? Matthew?
I was in Allegheny County, which is where a lot of the Democratic votes in Pennsylvania come from. Notably, the voter turnout among Democrats was very low. I know there were suppression efforts by media to get folks to think it was all the same and consequently not vote. But on the other hand, it was quite low and a very energetic race. So I'm asking for people who have gone to the point, have seen as poll workers and or as voter protection poll watchers. Have you seen it? Have you seen the people show up and they were registered in that polling place, but their name was not to be found in the poll book or wherever you sign in on an actual book to vote? Because those people could have been sent somewhere else, not knowing whether they actually voted in the end. And they could have been asked to cast a provisional, even though that was their polling place. I saw that happen. I heard that was happening before I arrived. That's the question. Anyone else have that? Thank you.
Let me talk about provisional ballots and voter responsibility. So there are many, many, many different ways where you can find where your polling place is. There are many states, and Virginia is one of them, where if you show up to vote at the wrong polling location, they are supposed to tell you you are in the wrong polling location. If you want to vote here, theoretically, we'll give you a provisional ballot to make you feel good. We ain't counting it. That is just the way that it works. Any state that does same-day registration, if you register and vote on the same day, you are given a provisional ballot. Many states, and again, Virginia included, if you are given a provisional ballot because you did not present ID, in Virginia, they're very generous. You have until noon on Friday to show up and clear that provisional ballot. The laws are going to be different and wiggly in every single state. But yeah, there were
Okay,
a
okay,
lot of
Andrea,
provisionals
thanks so
here.
much. I'm aware of some of the things. Thank you very much. It's a great explanation. I'm asking about people who are confirmed to be registered at that particular location. That's the question I'm asking, just the crowd. I didn't see anyone in the chat yet who said yes. It's people who are known to be registered at the polling place, but are not being found in the polling book and therefore have been turned away or need to cast provisionals until I show up. And eventually I've heard there's been this going on. And then finally I'm standing over the table and they call the Board of Elections and that person is registered. They even wrote in a name for that person in the poll book. It was very ad hoc, but this was 3% of the vote that day. And that's why I'm asking, did anyone else besides me see that at your precinct? Thank you for the explanation, but I'm not seeing it yet, but please speak up if you had. Thank you for letting me share.
Well, the question then becomes, when Greg was warning about this, as he did in Florida 2000, were enough people turned away across the country? If it's 3%, that's a huge number, to have affected the outcome. If you're saying 3% of the vote in Allegheny County, which is Pittsburgh, was turned away, and you would assume they're mostly or almost all Democrats, that would have changed things. I mean, I don't know what the percentage is between Trump and Harris overall, but then the question is, are they in fact going to start arresting people who speak out? Are they going to, as Hitler did? Is he going to establish camps as we predicted and start off with migrants or immigrants, but then start putting in political prisoners as Hitler did? And as I predicted in 2 pieces. Is that the reality we're looking at? Are they going to start putting people in places like Dachau that they did in Germany? It's hard to conceive in this country, but on the other hand, we all saw and heard Donald Trump and what he was saying, and that's what he was essentially saying, is that he's going to do that.
Mimi, don't be shy. Put your hand up in the air if you want to ask a
Oh,
question.
Mimi, did you want to speak? Go ahead.
For some reason on my Zoom, I cannot find my little hand.
That's all
raised.
right.
Okay, thanks. I have 2 things to share about what you just said, Sonny. I mentioned this on Monday. I was part of Antifa in Portland, fighting back against the Proud Boys who were coming into our streets back in 2015 to try out how this is going to go, because they knew Trump was already talking about what he wanted to do way back when. And they tried it out. They were very successful in Portland. We were also, as Antifa, successful in derailing a lot of the damage that they could have done to human damage. I'm not talking about like storefronts. And then, of course, they went to Charlottesville and killed Heather Heyer. And those were the initial battles to see how far they could get. And here we are, which is why I ask, it's true, if we don't take care of a lot of this stuff before Biden is gone, to me, there is no room for any of this. And I totally hear what you're saying, Andrea, about upcoming elections. And that is assuming that Trump isn't going to nix all elections. I mean, I don't know that. You know, I know that my family originally had to deal with the pogroms. I know that in 2015 through 17, we had to deal with the Proud Boys in Portland, and then, you know, so on in Virginia and in Nashville just a few months ago. They were doing Nazi parades down the streets in Nashville. Yesterday at Texas U, there are men protesting in the streets with signs that say women are our property. And it's happening now. So I I have to say too, Andrea, when you were talking about, oh yeah, right, there's a vote in 2 years or next year, whatever, that actually made me feel good. But my mindset is that where democracy works, and their mindset is we will not allow democracy to work.
That's not the corporate mindset. That doesn't help the corporations. So there's going to be
Well, that's the
elections.
question.
They may be rigged and fixed, but there will be something like an election. We are a consumer country. The corporations want us to consume. They understand there must be at least an appearance of democracy. Elections aren't going anywhere.
So the question is, will the elections even approach any reality?
That really is the question. Does the Democratic Party, do they bite at all that corporate money like they have in the past? And again, throw the voters under the bus. We want our money. I mean, I had a U.S. House race in Virginia, $30 million. One U.S. House race. That's ridiculous.
Well, we have Greg Coleridge on the call, who's worked on Citizens United all these years, and then Mike Hirsch has a hand, but we certainly haven't made any, you know, since and before Citizens United, there was Buckley and Bellotti, and that was all Lewis Powell, the court justice who came on the court from the Chamber of Commerce, who had written a memo in 1971, basically saying the corporations to take over America. And then he was a Virginian, and he gets on the court and has these decisions, and then in comes, I don't know if he was still around for Citizens United, Lewis Powell. He may have retired by then, but now we have a country where legally the corporations run the show, and elections are for show. I mean, the Democratic Party has produced precisely one major national figure to speak for the people, and that's been Bernie. And you know, they've shut him out. So let's keep. Okay, Mike Hirsch, and then John Steiner, and then Alex Williams. Mike,
go ahead, John, and I'll go after you.
All right. Andrea, I want to pick up on what you just said. And Mimi Kennedy said something in the last call is we can't really think about any kind of third force as long as we have Citizen United. However, from the seat you're sitting in and how you're holding this, do you see the possibility of any kind of new major constituency showing up in the next few years to counteract, obviously, the party in charge and the worst of the Democrats at this point?
There's two issues, John. Number one, ballot access. If it's just like congressional or even US Senate, that's not that big a deal. So you've got ballot access. You then have voter file infrastructure and the people who know how to run it. What we've sort of done here in Virginia is we have sort of supplanted the party, meaning that if there is a very good candidate and we want that candidate on the ballot, we will come in the primary and basically run the infrastructure to get them elected, because the ballot access isn't really an issue. It's very, very small. When you get to bigger races, what has stopped many other organizations in the past, the Green Party and various other iterations, it's been access to the voter file, access to enough people to meaningfully be able to do turnout, to do the mechanics of physically electing somebody.
So, Andrea, from that perspective, what you've done in Virginia is extraordinary. Do you see that model being able to be applied to other states? Do you see that?
That's also what we did in Alabama.
And beyond those two states? And I guess what that would lead to.
It would work in Georgia and it would work in North Carolina. They are both bigger than Virginia, so we would need a lot more democracy centers to have people work. Now, we work as a C3. What that does is that allows faith people to come in and work with us. So with 5 national faith partners, that gives us 85,000 volunteers. Is that enough to win a presidential election? No, but it can really help even at the congressional and the US Senate level.
So I think this is for an offline conversation, which I'd like to have with you and others who want to, of who else out there with this kind of understanding and people power that you're not working with, that you could, who share this point of view.
Yes. And again, we're holding a meeting next week. The young man that we work with in North Carolina, Ray and Richard, my Democracy Center leaders in Virginia and Alabama. We are all going to come together. What did we do that worked amazingly well in these 2 states?
And I'm just putting back into chat a conversation that's going to happen in a couple of hours with the Election Response Center, with Working Families Party, Move On, et cetera, Indivisible. I don't know if you have time to make that, but I think these are the kinds of organizations who, if they know what you're doing, my guess is they don't, could be very important partners here.
I will be
All
on
right.
that call.
Good, yeah, John, that's a good connection. We appreciate that. We have, I think Mike Fox is still with us. Mike is from PDA, and of course we have Mike Hirsch who's had his hand. Mike Hirsch, you want to jump in now? Are you unmuted? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to say I appreciate everybody who's expressed faith in the election that we just had, and faith in that we'll have meaningful elections moving forward. I do not completely share that faith, but I don't have enough evidence to present at this point. However, I do want to present a cautionary tale. A good friend of mine grew up in Brazil. She and her mother moved there as immigrants. And when they arrived, Brazil was a thriving democracy. A few years after they arrived, a military junta took over the government. And they had a show of elections, but the real power was with the generals who were running the country. And she talked about the pervasive anxiety, and everyone knew of people who spoke out and disappeared. And I have very little confidence that unless we do something between now and when Trump is inaugurated to ensure that that doesn't happen, that people will be disappeared for speaking out against the regime. And it's, I just keep flashing back. Mimi mentioned the parallels to Germany, and the Nazis rose to power decrying, licentiousness and perversion and things like that, and the poisoning of German blood. And these are themes that Trump and his supporters have been campaigning on. And the fact that Trump's, I crunched the exit polling, and Trump's support almost entirely came from men within a certain age group who do not have college education. And also there were some women who don't have a college education who were also supportive of Trump. But it was a very narrow range of kind of old-fashioned white men who feel aggrieved. And that's basically they feel like they're being victimized by the rest of us. They're feeling insulted by tolerance for minorities and for women and for LGBTQ plus people. And this is their striking back. And I don't see any restraint after Inauguration Day. And I'm hoping that we can focus on what we can do between now and then to ensure that unbridled violence, intimidation, and misuse of state power to suppress dissent doesn't make subsequent elections meaningless.
Okay, well, of course, a lot of the pundits are blaming wokeness on for Trump, and you know, that's very much in line with the Hitler attack on the equivalent of wokeness in Germany at the time. Alex Williams and then Dorothy again. Alex, are you unmuted? Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
Hey, yeah, I'm glad to see people are working and doing things, and I congratulate Miss Miller for what she's doing in Virginia. I think though, what the last caller said, this is the last best hope we have is hanging on to the House. That's still up in the air. If that can manifest itself, we can do that, then we probably will, more than likely, will have another election in 2 years and 4 years. If we don't do that, then all bets are off. You know, we'll go to the phony election, and I take these guys at their word. They're really going to crack down, bust heads, and it's at a time where you have to, I hate to say it, but you got to be willing to go to jail. You got to be willing to be locked up, or maybe some of our family members end up disappearing, you know, because I also think that the progressive side is not going to sit around. You know, there will be progressive governors and states that like stand up to this and not take it. And these guys at the top, they're not just going to say, "Oh well," it could get really ugly. That's what I'm saying. Really, really ugly. I don't know, but hopefully that will be the catalyst it takes to change things around. And I will say, let me say this one last thing. I heard Bernie the other day, and I think he was dead on. One thing the Democrats can do, one thing that would help, is from here on out, no more with the corporate Democrats, because then lost too many elections. I mean,
yeah. Did you disappear on us, Alex? Oh, you got muted.
I was going to say, did they drag him away from making those good
can you hear me
points?
now?
Yeah, go ahead, and then we'll go to Dorothy.
I'm gonna finish up. Well, here's the thing. I think this, in a way, is kind of good, because that way, I think now there'll be really push for more progressive Democrats with some guts, because, you know, the only reason, here's the thing. Why did 12 million people not show up?
Yeah.
That's my question. Why? Because if she just got what Biden got last time, it wouldn't be in a contest. But they just didn't show up.
Right. Or
There's
else
something
they were
wrong with
stripped
that.
from the voter rolls. Or else they were stripped from the voter rolls.
Well, they're not counting.
Thank you,
I didn't want to go there, but
well,
I thought
we
about
may
that
have to.
myself. Yeah,
Thank you,
I
Alex.
thought about that. Yeah.
Thank you, Alex. Appreciate that. Dorothy and then
Yeah, by
Mimi.
the time I get called on, I forget what I was gonna say.
Come back
But
to you.
I don't believe that that many people were stripped from the voter rolls. What's amazing to me is how many Black and Latino men voted for Trump. And that's something that we have to consider. Why, somebody asked me, I said, well, I mean, Latino men, where's the word macho come from? They've always believed that women were second-class citizens, a lot of them, though, especially I would imagine the more uneducated ones. But it's a terrifying thing. I also was on a call with the oh God, what's the name of the ones? Oh God, the group that were Indivisibles. Indivisible. I was on a call with them last night. And Ezra was actually on MSNBC last night. They don't seem to think there's not going to be elections. They are already organizing to pressure the elected officials that are in office now and the ones that are going to be in office, and organizing to call people in their districts and make sure that they understand that they'll be voted out if they support certain issues. And that's what they do. And PDA, I think, does the same thing, where we call people in the district of the congressman that we want to, or the senators that we want, who we want to influence, and make sure that they're getting a call from somebody with the right zip code. Because if they get a call from out of their area, they don't care. They only care if they get calls from constituents. But I can't let myself believe that we're not going to have elections, that we're not going to be able to fight back without going to jail. I was going to say, Gavin Newsom has already called back the legislature to authorize further funding to initiate lawsuits or to sue Trump if he tries to pull anything in California.
Right.
What I'm afraid of is he's going to try to federalize the National Guard here to arrest immigrants. And I talked to my gardener today, who's Mexican, and he has a lot of Mexican people working for him. He has big crews going around. And I asked him, Victor, are you worried? Are you scared? And he's a citizen. He's not scared, but he said that he told his workers, do not go outside. Work, go home, and stay inside. Do not go out. So that's...
I think we ought to propose, Dorothy, all as Californians, that we secede. We form a new country with Oregon, Washington, and Hawaii. We'll call it Ecotopia, and I'm all ready for that. So we'll see.
There was a Calexit. Unfortunately, it was started by some guy in Moscow.
Yeah. Well, Ecotopia of California, Oregon, Washington, maybe British Columbia, and Hawaii. That would be a great country.
Well, it'd be good if we could find a way to withhold our tax money from Washington. I mean, already we have to worry. We just had a huge fire in Ventura County that Trump is threatening to withhold FEMA money and aid from. Luckily for them, Ventura County is a lot of Republicans, so they'll probably get their money. But if there was a fire in LA County, we would be in trouble if he follows through on that. And I wonder whether the rest of the people in the country would think that that's okay.
I don't know. Mimi from Indivisible, Mike Foxton, and Dave Saltman. I got your note. Your hand's not up, but we will call on you after. Mike, obviously, we're going to go past the top of the hour, but we'll keep talking as long as people want. Mimi, go ahead. Mimi, S, she, her, Indivisible.
Yes, thank you, Sluggo. Good to see you. This is Mimi Spreadbury from San Jose, California, and I'm agreeing with all the folks here that Bernie said it best. The DNC has left behind the working class people, and previously it's been, the whites, and other ethnicities are catching up on it. And with most people living paycheck to paycheck, it is over 50%. I think it's 60%. Someone jump in if they know what that is. It just was really tone deaf. And then I believe a lot of people did not want to vote for genocide as well. So something needs to be, so something needs to be done about the corporate Democrats, as somebody was saying, that, how many lessons do they have to learn or take? And I guess they're not taking them. Thank you so much, Sluggo.
Thank you. Thank you, Mimi. Mike Fox and then Dave Saltman and then Marilyn Bernstein.
Yeah, thanks, Sluggo. Love the conversation, etc. And to Mimi's point, kind of why PDA exists right there. If everybody on this call was a member of their Democratic Party board, either county or state level, that's how we pull it back. We almost got Keith Ellison elected to the top of the party. We came up short, but it was only by, if I remember correctly, it was less than a point. We have the power to make that happen. It just requires doing. And in that vein, I can tell you, along with all of the issues that we've talked about here, why we lost, without getting into any of the, underhanded, dark, did the machine change anything kinds of theories. And that's how I got here, gang, was through the vote verification movement back in early 2000. So I hear you and I'm with you, but I can tell you exactly why we not only got thumped at the presidential level, but likewise lost our county commission advantage. We just got crushed in Pinellas County. Why? We didn't hit a single voter contact goal, not one. Oh, there was a bunch of talk about, oh my God, look at this wave of volunteers coming in. It was real. We had 3,000 people sign up to volunteer in Pinellas County, like within 3 days of when Harris became the nominee. Out of those 3,000 people, less than 50 actually worked. There's our biggest challenge, gang, right there, is not just talking, but doing. And I share my sister who's with Antifa's fears about what if we don't have an election, et cetera, et cetera. I hear you, sister. But right this second, we are curing ballots in Nevada to ensure that we hold that Senate seat. I'll toss the link in again. I've tossed it in 4 times in this call. Haven't got a single sign up. Just candidly. Haven't got one out of a room of 70 people. So that's what we need to keep in mind, gang. There are a lot of really bright people on this call. There are people on this call that are brighter than me. However,
that's not possible.
There are. And I'm halfway to my PhD in political science, taught at 3 universities. I'll take my resume from a book learning standpoint. But it just comes down to cutting wood and carrying water, gang. Seriously. Okay. So, and I haven't seen anything official from the Harris campaign on whether or not they hit their goals. I know that when their national phone bank started, they said their goal was 5 million contacts. And the day before the election, they were at 3.2. in public as you signed up for it. So there you go, gang. Sweat, bottom line. And I'll toss the link in one more time. Ask folks to sign up, and I got to get on the phone to Nevada. Y'all rock.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike Fox. Dave Saltman?
Harvey, it's all your fault because you didn't go on Joe Rogan's thing.
Yeah, I thought it was Rogaine, but I got plenty of hair, so I didn't think I needed it.
Well, I have just 4 little talking points based on well, I won't even tell you what they're based on. Number 1, my niece Sarah, 28 years old, as woke as could possibly be, brilliant and very political. She comes from my political family. She was very angry at us progressives because she felt that we really let down the working class, and that the Democratic Party specifically let down the working class. So I know that Bernie is agreeing with that today. I just passed that on from the 28-year-olds who apparently were the decisive factor in this election. That's not point number 1. All of these we could talk about forever. Point number 2, I don't know if you saw this. Just a couple hours ago, the German government failed. The government fell.
Yeah.
There is a huge international realignment happening as we speak. I don't know where it's going to go. Number three, I I'm sorry that my friend brought up Brazil because, as you know, I've spent a lot of time in Brazil. In Brazil, when they finally found a good presidential candidate, I'm talking about Tancredo Neves, if you guys are familiar with the Brazilian mishmash of politics. He was finally elected after tremendous, leftish and middle road and just not military, not the junta politicking. And he mysteriously had a little heart attack just on Inauguration Day and died on the operating table. That can happen. It is nasty. Number four, I know Harvey knows this, but I was deeply, if you remember the PBS series, The Power Game with Hedrick Smith, I was the producer of the series. And I interviewed virtually everybody in Washington, from the President of the United States in the Oval Office down to the guy that shined the shoes in the Capitol cloakroom, and almost every congressman, senator, and so on. And what I heard from every last one of those people, except for Ronald Reagan, who had no idea what he was talking about. Money, it's all about money. So we can't get away from, I don't think, at least in the current climate, we can't get away from it. We have to deal with that and do better with that. We can't be afraid of money like left-wingers, at least since the 60s, have always been. I don't have any brilliant investment ideas, but probably Camilla Reese and John Steiner do. So it's
well, the bottom, we don't know actually how much money Elon Musk put in and where he spent it. And his ownership of Twitter, really
not only is
something we couldn't account for.
Capable of buying a controlling interest in Donald Trump's DJT, his New York Stock Exchange entry, which would mean that he would directly profit. He and Trump would be business partners as well as government partners. The thing is, I can't tell you the degree to which it stinks. I do have one positive thing to say, or I hope it's positive. We do have one really good asset, or could become a really good asset, and that is the Pacifica Network. What I'm really worried about as a professional journalist all my life is, the end of journalism, because it's already happening. But the Pacifica Network could be a haven. It would have to change radically, as you all know. Anyway, I just want to throw it out there. I wish I had the solutions.
Yeah, well, none of the dialogue that I've been reading really accounts for the factor of a very focused, high-tech billionaire willing to spend any amount of money to put Trump in. And their guy is really Vance. He's the tech guy. The question then is how long are they going to let Trump be the front man? One thing we need to consider is the high likelihood that J.D. Vance will become president.
No question about it.
And talk about money and influence, that's it. All right, David. Well, thank you. David is quite learned, by the way, and knows wherever he speaks. You did interview Ronald Reagan in the White House. Is that correct?
I was the only journalist, I believe, until today, am still the only journalist ever to interview a sitting president in the Oval Office. It's very rare. One of the reasons was they didn't think that our audio was working, but it was. And we also interviewed Nancy Reagan, who was an amazing interviewee, because she's the only person I've interviewed thousands and thousands of people. She's the only person I've ever interviewed who, before we started, she presented me a card with her lighting instructions, which include two little eye lights that had to go right underneath the lower lashes. I never got.
Well, I still contend that Nancy Reagan was actually one of our best presidents.
Well, she was definitely running things, because Ronnie was not. There's
Yeah,
no,
she definitely ran the country after 1985, and she's the one who ended the Cold War. She was also pro-choice, and she was, I would say she's far better than at least half the presidents of the United States, including the other woman, Edith Wilson, who was horrible. But there you go.
going to suggest Barbara Bush, who I
Oh,
also
God, no. God, no.
a witch.
Okay. Thank you, David Saltman. You are a great resource, and go blue. Marilyn Bernstein again, then Mike first, and then Mike Hirsch again. Go ahead, Marilyn.
Two things. I want Massachusetts in their new country.
Oh, well, New England should have its own country. Actually, I was thinking about that. You could actually include Virginia now. But I did have an interview, I don't know, 20 years ago with Ernest Callenbach, who wrote the book, and it's on video somewhere, who wrote the book Ecotopia, which posited, California, Oregon, and Washington being a country. And if we added Hawaii, what a great country that would be. So something to think about. We could. I wonder if we'd win a vote. Do you think we'd win a referendum in those four states to get a separate country? Dorothy's shaking her head. All right, let's do it. And God forbid we should have to rely on Gavin Newsom here in California, because he's so totally screwed us on Diablo Canyon, and he has completely wrecked the electric rate system. But that's another story. Maryland, so Maryland, that was it. So yes, I would have a country of Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, Connecticut, Rhode Island.
So weird.
I did have this come up, by the way. Anybody want a trivia question? What four states of the United States have been separate countries? We had this on our radio show with MYLA yesterday. There are four states of the United States that have been separate countries.
Texas was, right?
Texas, although that was disputed yesterday. What are the other three? Anybody know? All right, I won't keep you on TATANKA. Oh,
California was one.
California and Texas were both, although the caller yesterday disputed that, said there was still territories of Mexico. But California and Texas technically have been separate countries. Does anybody know the other two? Nobody. It's so obvious. Hawaii was a
right
constitutional monarchy long before it unwillingly became part of the United States. And I bet you if we took a referendum now whether Hawaii should go back to being a separate country, I bet we'd win. and nobody ever knows the other one. It's Vermont. After the revolution and the North America became independent of the British, Vermont refused to join the United States until 1793. It was the Democratic Republic of Vermont. So there you go. Four states that have been countries. Okay, Mike Hirsch, and then Dorothy again. Mike? Dorothy, you may want to write down what you want to say so you won't forget it this time. Okay, Mike, and then Dorothy.
That's actually really good advice for everybody. Jot down a few notes so you can keep track of what you were going to say. I almost forgot what I was going to say, but we were talking about Nancy Reagan as being one of the finest presidents, considering, and that's not as high of a bar as we would like to say, but yes, she was far better than her husband. And speaking of her husband, he basically dismantled much of the New Deal, which had been a bipartisan consensus after Franklin Roosevelt basically dragged the United States into the 20th century, kicking and screaming. And the Democrats under Bill Clinton repudiated the New Deal. And I think that that's basically, where we've gone back into the 19th century. And here we are in the 21st century with 19th century institutions. And it's a mismatch that does not serve people. When people, somebody was ascribing to Churchill the quote, people want to go back to the good old days, but they can never exactly say what was so good about them. And it might have been Churchill, it might have been somebody else. But that to me, that's the heart of MAGA, make America great again. What do they mean? When women couldn't could not get divorced, could not get credit cards, could only work in a few occupations, when people of color were lucky to be second-class citizens, were largely third-class citizens and could be lynched at a moment's notice. What is this, golden age that they're trying to drive us back to? And what we're finding out, I think, is that the economic consensus of the New Deal, which a lot of historians, Sluggo, you might be one of them, said that it's basically saved capitalism from seizing up and destroying itself. Because without regulation and reform and counterbalancing, capitalism has this increasing boom-bust cycle. And that's what we've been seeing. By backing away from the New Deal, Reagan and then Clinton, and presidents and policymakers since then have left hundreds of millions of our people furious, desperate, and upset. And what that leads to is screw whoever's in there. And we're seeing, the country repudiated Trump 4 years ago, and a few days ago said, well, let's bring them back. It's like bringing back your ex. They were terrible for you, but you bring them back anyway. I think it's because we've gone away from New Deal economic principles. What do people think?
I think you're 100% right. It's like Elizabeth Taylor remarrying Richard Burton. How well did that go? Anyway, but okay, Dorothy, you have some notes, please?
Yeah, so I just want to make sure that nobody has a kind word to say about Nancy Reagan. Ronald Reagan was a good Democrat until he met Nancy Reagan and the Bloomingdales and all these rich people. And then he became governor and was mean to the people, to poor people in California. And then he became president, and he actually accomplished, according to the Project 2025 people, 60% of what they wanted done. He just didn't finish the job, and now we're going to have Trump and Vance try to finish the job. But he was a disaster for this country. He lied to get into office, if you remember, with the hostages in Iran. He sent weapons to the Contras. We all know Brian Wilson, who got his legs cut off trying to stop the trains of weapons to the Contras. The guy was terrible. And Nancy Reagan, if you think that she was the president, then she was terrible. She was a disaster. My God.
Well, by the time she came in, much of the damage had been done, but
he was behind. She made him president. You don't understand.
Yes. No, I understand.
By the time she came in, she was there all the time. She was there whispering in his ear. She believed in astrology. That's why a lot of his meetings and stuff were arranged according to her astrologist. She was nuts.
Conversely, when you talk about the New Deal, you really have to talk about Eleanor Roosevelt. Franklin Roosevelt would have
never,
there's
a good president.
And he would have never been president either without Eleanor. And she was really the architect of the New Deal. And that's why I believe, just going further afield here, if Franklin Roosevelt had still been alive on August 6, 1945, she would have never let him drop the bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
For sure.
What he would have done is, I'm pretty sure, is drop it in the countryside, which Leo Szilard.
You didn't need to drop it at all. The Japanese were surrendering.
He would have dropped it because
you have it, so you have to use it.
Yeah, the reason it's exactly right. The reason he would have used it, being Franklin Roosevelt, is because they spent $2 billion developing it. So pragmatist that he was, I would be, this is speculation, of course, just like we speculate what John Kennedy would have done in Vietnam. And I do not believe he would ever have escalated the war in Vietnam. And that we're still paying for that.
They had to kill him.
And the homeless crisis in the United States today is not 100% Ronald Reagan's fault. In the 1980s, they had Congress passed a $65 billion bill to build public housing, and he killed it. And then, of course, Clinton buried it. But anyway, that's another
And then
story. Let's continue.
he shut down the mental hospital. So then.
Yes, he did. Right. Marilyn Bernstein, and then anybody else wants to raise a hand. We're gonna, once the hands stop coming up, we'll adjourn. We will meet again on Monday. This was a great session. Thank you so much. We had 60 people, and obviously very necessary. Mimi, thank you for your poetry, and Salty for your comments. Everybody. Marilyn, did you want to say something, please?
I just had that question. What was the figure that high figure for possible people purged from the voter rolls that we
10
heard?
million.
10 million?
Yeah. Greg Pallas has said it could have been as many as 10 million, and it's quite possible, quite likely. So, Alex Williams again, and then anybody else want to raise your hand? We're not going to go all the way to 4:20 today, maybe 3:20 California time. But people want to join me in Ecotopia. Let's CC. That would be wonderful to have a country like that. I'd like to see what the margins were: California, Washington, and Hawaii for Harris as opposed to Trump. I think they all went blue in a big way, but
Lucky, what do you want?
Alex Williams, go ahead. Anybody else, please, Sandy, and then we'll
Yeah,
go.
I just wanted to say I didn't know that Vermont was a country.
It was.
I think most of the East Coast from Maine to Virginia could be its own country, and maybe we could hook up with the West Coast some kind of way. And I mean, we pay for the rest of the country anyway, But anyway,
the blue states do support the red states. There's no doubt.
And yeah, it did all. It really went down with Reagan because just as a kid in like the early 1970s, and this is something we could bring home. One person could work and afford to get a house, have a vacation, all that stuff. And young people today can't even imagine that. It just blows their mind.
And she didn't speak to that. Kamala did not speak to that.
No. That's the problem. That's the problem. Yeah.
Right.
And I didn't know, I know Reagan was a Democrat, but I didn't know when he met Nancy, that was the beginning of the switch.
It was, yes, it was. And he turned into a real horrible guy later on. I met him once in 1980. Boy, I looked at Ronald Reagan, I knew immediately he was going to be president. And at the same time, I met H.W. Bush, who was right out of the country club.
And one last thing.
You're right. It was the economics and the Democrats, as Bernie has very clearly stated, and Bernie could have been president in 2016. We'd be living in a whole other world. A whole other world.
One last thing is the Washington. Watch the movie, two movies, Idiocracy and The Brainwashing of My Dad.
Okay. Idiocracy and The
Because
Brainwashing of My Dad. And the question we're going to have to...
Idiocracy is a comedy. We're living in it.
Thank you for... Well, you wouldn't know. But thank you, Alex. The question is, are people from these calls going to start disappearing? That's the question, right? That'll be the defining moment. Mimi and then Sandy Bozenius. Anybody else raise your hand, please? Mimi from Indivisible, go ahead. Are you unmuted? No, you're not unmuted.
Okay, there I go. Sorry, I think it was a
go ahead.
Sorry about that. I wanted to tell you all that there was some really great news out of Maine. I believe it was Proposition 1, which puts limits on election money for certain super PACs. And it was the limit was $5,000. We just saw a slaughter with outside money, PG&E here in the Bay Area. So I wanted to tell everyone there was this great news. We need to do this nationwide. And then I said on a call with TATANKA last night, I'm rereading, TATANKA, I'm gonna forget his name. I'm reading George Lakey's book, his memoir on how to, dance while you protest or protest joyfully, with forwards by Bill McKibben and Danny Ellsberg. So we just have to get ready to fight back and joyfully. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I think Salty really raised the key issue, which was money. I mean, they had unlimited money. Elon Musk alone could have bought the election 10 times over. So that may be at the core of what happened. Sandy and then TATANKA.
Yeah, first of all, if you guys do start another country, can you like kind of come in and collect Columbus, Ohio, and throw us
No,
in?
you're going to have to leave.
No.
You'll have to move.
But anyway, I already stated my proposal at the beginning about really gathering behind Greg Palast and talking to places and asking them, mainstream news, and asking them to invite him on. I think they would do it because they're nervous as heck too. And but I spent a lot of my time reading crazily about World War II and the people during World War II, and it just comes fast. Victor Klempner wrote about his time when he was in Germany, a German Jew married to a Christian, and it just comes so fast and furious. So I am terrified of what happens with Trump, MAGA, and Project 2025. So I think we really need to do something now when we have some control, and hopefully it won't be too late afterwards, but I'm not confident.
Well, we'll see if they start picking people up, then these calls will diminish. No doubt about it. Thank you, Sandy. TATANKA, Joanne Dollard, Mimi German.
Yeah, I just want to encourage people, if they haven't already, Bernie's last one-page email memo a day or two before the election, he said, win or lose, this is what we must do, and a list of things that we have to do to change the Democratic Party. That's an important piece of communication. The other thing is that on the Ronald Reagan issue, you might remember Barbara Honegger. She wrote the book October.
Yeah.
She was in the Reagan White House. She actually was at Stanford. It's an interesting story. Had an issue against a professor on sexually mishandling her. I can't remember the exact thing, but Stanford blew her off, but one guy didn't. And he ended up working with Reagan when he was governor. And when Reagan went to the White House, he took this woman, Barbara Honegger, with him. And she told me personally, because I had a Ronald Reagan 3x5 card story, she said, you don't know anything. She was in there, I think, 2.5 years, kind of supposedly with women's issues. Never been involved politically before until she was fired. She said Ronald Reagan's, she observed every morning Ronald Reagan would come down. He had been given 3x5 cards to memorize. Then he was handed the 3x5 cards with a color tab for which room, walk into the room, 2 white dots on the floor, put his feet down. The people would be entered in, and he was a good memorizer, and he would memorize his lines that were scripted for him. He'd do this for a few hours, and it would be lunchtime. And they would go up to lunch and have about 50 policy issues to decide on. Reagan would sleep, and Nancy, she said, Nancy basically made all the decisions. Came down the next day with Nancy's work. Reagan does the memorizing thing and then disappears for the day.
There you go.
2.5 years.
We'll see if that's what Trump does, but Melania is not going to play Nancy Reagan. So we'll see.
Oh, no, not with Trump. I mean, Bannon says, no, this is Trump. His job is to, throw shit. His job was to create a swamp, accuse the Democrats of swamp, just throw the shit up there. That's his job.
Okay. Yeah, I think you're right. Mimi, you started. You want to finish? Go ahead. I don't see anybody else's hands up. So,
Joanne Dollard may or may not wish to speak. It's hard.
I thought Joanne, did you speak? Joanne Dollard?
She did not. She had her hand up and then.
No, I'm sorry. I haven't spoken yet. And I'm driving, which is why you can't see me. So,
well, you shouldn't be talking while you're driving. So make it real quick.
Well, I will make it quick.
Please.
I just wanted to say I'm a PDA member. I live in North Carolina. Really enjoy your meetings. And I just want to say that I really support Mike Fox's focus on water and getting out the sun.
Okay, Joanne, if you can come join us we can't understand you and you're driving, which is the one rule we have. So can you join us on Monday, please? You're
Okay.
frozen now anyway. We
Sure,
can't-
sorry.
It's okay. Come back Monday. We'll be glad to have you. Just don't be driving, okay? Mimi. Anybody else? Mimi, otherwise you can finish.
So just two things. I know people are planning, or at least I'm hearing talks about people planning rallies and things like this. And I just want everybody to really be careful when or if you attempt to confront MAGA people, because at this point, they will punch you in the face. There's no restraints. So I don't have a gentler way of saying that. So there's that. But I did want to say that one of my close friends just became the mayor of Walport, Oregon, on the coast, small little town. And she is an anti-nuker. And she and I organized the protest, the first and only ever protest on Hanford's ground in 2015. And she just became the mayor of Walport. And I just think that's so wonderful that we have Heidi, an anti-nuker, wonderful, caring human being who had like no money to put into a campaign. And she just said, I care. I just care
Well, there
about
you
it.
go.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll make Walport the capital of Ecotopia.
There.
There
There.
you go.
Maybe we'll get the new mayor on for Monday.
All right. Yes, please. That'd be great. Absolutely. Bring her on. We have had Jennifer Roberts, the former mayor of Charlotte. So we're good on mayors. All right. Thank you. And thank you for your beautiful poems, Mimi. Cynthia Chauhan, did you want to finish here?
I just want to say thank you all. I live in the heart of the red country. I'm liberal. It's scary here. And you give me so much hope. So
Well,
I'm going to be sharing your information with other people here who are scared.
Well, we got to stick together. This is the moment now. You know,
Yeah.
I'm tempted to say that in 1787, when they finished writing the Constitution, somebody asked Ben Franklin what kind of government it is. He says, "A republic if you can keep it." And maybe we haven't now. We'll have to see. So thank you for that. Thank you, everybody. We will meet again 2 p.m. Pacific time on Monday. That's 5 p.m. Eastern time. We'll see who, you know, what we got on our hands. It's something that we've never experienced before. Everybody, we love you. No nukes. We'll see you in Solartopia, and we'll see you at 2 p.m. Don't Mourn Organize. We'll see you at 2 p.m. Pacific time, 5 p.m. Eastern time on Monday. Same link. And Lindy